I'm John Batchelor. Gordon Chang is with me, and we're going to Hong Kong to our colleague and friend Joseph Sternberg, the business editor of the editorial page of the Asia Wall Street Journal. Joe is publishing within these hours a column by Raymond Zhang, writing for him about the media in China. This is on mainland China that isn't all directly controlled by the princelings, Xinhua and Beijing. However, the warning here is that it's not a watchdog press as we have. We flatter ourselves. Joe, good morning to you. Is this a watch puppy? Excuse my comparison, Joe, but I'm trying to imagine what a press is that doesn't exactly obey you, but it then again can be intimidated. Good morning, Joe.
Hi, John. Well, as my colleague Raymond points out, what we have in China right now is a press that's increasingly competitive, and I think actually your phrase "watch puppy" is right in many respects. You have here a lot of idealistic journalists who are also increasingly in the position of having to try to make money from their journalism, attracting advertising by attracting readers, and so one consequence of that is that they're starting to push the envelope a little bit more in terms of what stories they can cover, how much corruption or official incompetence they can expose, and still get away with it in an environment where the Communist Party is still really trying to control the message and the press as much as possible.
Well, Joe, this is not just journalists at state-run media. This is also citizens, because we have a Twitter-like service in China, Sina's Weibo, which has 140, 150 million users, and these people can actually post things, put them on the internet. Yeah, they get taken down by the censors, but they also are saved, and sometimes, even censored items are still circulated in China. So what we're talking about is basically trying to censor all the Chinese people.
Right, Gordon, and I think that the Weibo website that you mentioned is a good example of how difficult this becomes. I think that because what has happened, and we really did see this in the wake of that terrible high-speed rail crash last month in Wenzhou, is that because you have platforms like this Chinese equivalent of Twitter, it becomes very difficult for the authorities to control the message in that critical, very early period right after an event like that, when public opinion starts to congeal. This is an interesting example of how, in response to a lot of the anger and outrage that appeared on Weibo in those very early hours before the censors had really caught on to how dangerous this was, has in turn driven a lot of the competitive, more mainstream media, newspapers and magazines, to try to push back against the censors as much as they think they can get away with, now that they know from Weibo that this is what readers want to read about.
Of course. I mean, people like celebrity stories everywhere, but I'm especially compelled by this possibility, Joe. I read from your colleague Raymond Zhang that party stalwarts like the People's Daily rub elbows with glossies or everything from investing in Southeast Asia to UFO research. Joe, do you have Martians in China's newsstands? I mean, is an audience developing here for the man in the moon?
Well, John, I think that what you would hope for is the development of the same kind of media diversity that we have in America.
No, but we're looking at big numbers to explore here, Joe.
Yeah. Well, I think that what that shows is that there's a great appetite for any kind of information people can get. And sometimes that'll be frothy, but, there's also a lot of market for serious news.
I'm doing Bigfoot in Tibet is what I'm doing. I mean, we got some big numbers here, Gordon.
Area 51.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder what it in Chinese. It must be really spectacular. Those aliens that came down, Joe. No, really, what we're having here is that how stupid are the party bosses? You cannot let the genie out of the bottle. Don't they know their proverbs? And come on, Joe, they've got Chinese proverbs for everything.
This is why Kim Jong-il does not admire the Chinese, because what he's saying is...
Stupid. Allowing UFO research? What do you think they're going to read?
They're going to start calling the Communist Party bosses aliens.
Yes, exactly.
Well, that's a big irony of the situation, as my colleague Raymond Zhang points out. Initially, the Communist Party in China allowed this to happen because they thought it would make propaganda more effective. Back in the 70s and early 80s, it became clear that, a small number of state-owned media outlets weren't capable of delivering propaganda that was interesting enough for anyone to pay attention. And so they thought that, if they opened the door a little bit, they would still be able to control the media, but they'd attract a little more private sector money, through advertising, sales, or sponsorship, to increase the production values of all of these vehicles that they thought would still be delivering the official line. And what they didn't count on is that once you crack open that door a little bit, it becomes increasingly difficult to control.
So Elvis Presley is 76 years old in Beijing. Is that the story?
Well, I think the story is that increasingly there are a lot of stories circulating in China.
It works. It'll work, Gordon. It'll work. I mean, really, you'll believe anything, right?
Elvis has left the building.
Yes. Joe, is this a good thing that they can't control it? Do the Chinese people celebrate the fact that it's out of control and they're going to get trashy media like us?
Oh, I think it is a very good thing that you can't control it because, a regime like the Communist Party in Beijing thrives on control of information. And again, what we've seen is that, a lot of these stories, the hot stories in China right now do involve official corruption. And it might not necessarily be at the central level. Perhaps these newspapers are going at lower level officials. But, it's all a matter of exposing the rot in the system. And so, from that perspective, I think that this is very good, and that's probably why the party wonders to a certain extent whether they really did the right thing by opening this up in the first place.
I'm worried, very much worried about the NPR of China. That's what I'm worried about. Has it really come along, and which side is it on? I mean, if you're the NPR in America, we know that you lean left, you're progressive, you have a strong opinion of centralized government. Okay, but if you're the NPR of China, what do you do, Gordon? Do you lean right? Is that possible?
No, what you do is you prepare to leave because the censors are on your tail.
All right. Joe, and right now, the Wall Street Journal, the Asia Wall Street Journal, you're competing with UFOs on the newsstand. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think we can win because we provide more serious news.
Because your aliens are more interesting than their aliens.
They tell the science fiction story of Elvis Presley in Beijing. That's why. Joseph Sternberg, the business editor of the Asia Wall Street Journal, editorial page. Gordon Chang, thank you, Gordon. Forbes.com and The Daily. I'm John Batchelor.